Before diving into the video, did you know that over 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed? Your one like and one subscribe means the absolute world to this channel and helps us keep going. Hit those buttons real quick, and let's get into the video. Chapter 1. The Seating Dilemma. Leo was a completely broke student who had been specially admitted on a rigid scholarship into the elite halls of the Silverwood Academy, a private school reserved exclusively for the city's top tier of wealth and privilege. In reality, the administration had only brought him in to boost the school's prestigious college admission statistics. To everyone else, he was an invisible outsider. Because of his threadbare uniform and penniless background, absolutely nobody looked up to him. When the highly anticipated placement test results for senior year were finally published on the main bulletin board, Leo ranked second in the entire grade, trailing right behind the top slot. To mark the occasion, the homeroom teacher decided to give up the morning self-study period so that the students could choose their permanent seats for the semester, explicitly dictated in order of their scores. In the dead center of the third row were four coveted, side-by-side desks, boasting the absolute best view of the blackboard. Leo hesitated for a brief moment, clutching his books tightly, before deciding to claim one of them. The very millisecond his bag hit the desk, the undisputed school beauty, Scarlett, who was already sitting in the adjacent seat, deeply frowned in absolute, undisguised disgust. Her expression of pure revulsion was so loud and immediate that nearly every single student lined up at the classroom door noticed the silent rejection. The moment the morning study session officially ended, a few wealthy classmates immediately swarmed the desk to mock Leo from the side. They jeered aggressively, loudly demanding how an eternal second-place guy had the absolute nerve to sit right next to the school beauty when he was so clearly ugly, broke, and entirely clueless about his place in the social hierarchy. They loudly mocked his cheap, oversized prescription glasses, laughing hysterically as they reached over to physically snatch them right off his face. Leo instinctively leaned away to protect what little he owned, but during the clumsy, aggressive shoving match, his shoulder accidentally brushed against Scarlett's sleeve. She sprang to her feet instantly, shrieking as if she had been severely burned by acid. In the chaotic scuffle, Leo's glasses flew out of his hand, clattering hard onto the linoleum floor, where one of the rich boys immediately stepped down with his heavy designer shoe, deliberately shattering the lenses into tiny shards. Scarlett spun around on her heel, her face twisted in annoyance, and sharply demanded that the girl sitting behind her switch desks immediately, promising she would deal with the paperwork and explain it to the teacher later. While Leo quietly crouched down on his hands and knees to sweep up the ruined pieces of his glasses, Scarlett migrated to her new desk with lightning speed, acting as though she were frantically escaping a deadly plague. As malicious, echoing laughter spread throughout the classroom, Scarlett deliberately raised her voice so everyone could hear, announcing how incredibly embarrassing and profoundly humiliating it was to be relentlessly pursued by a broke, pathetic loser like him, stating she couldn't even hold her head up in front of her high society friends. Chapter 2. The Secret Identity. Following a tense lunch period spent entirely alone, Leo quietly returned to his vacant dorm room for a brief afternoon nap, while his wealthy roommate was still out spending money. He cautiously took his smartphone out of the locked locker and snaked his way into the privacy of the bathroom stall. The exact moment the screen illuminated, a text message bank notification popped up on the display, showing that a massive sum of $180,000 had just been successfully deposited into his account. This substantial layout was the direct revenue generated from his massive live stream the previous evening. Looking down at the staggering seven-figure balance resting in his private account, Leo happily opened up his streaming platform app. He had quietly joined the massive entertainment platform a little over half a year ago, uploading more than a dozen highly produced singing videos that intentionally only featured his blurry, dimly lit silhouette against a microphone. Yet, in just 6 short months of digital anonymity, he had successfully gained tens of millions of intensely loyal followers under the mysterious online alias Vortex. After hitting upload on the latest edited guitar-playing clip he had recorded the night before, He prepared to shut his phone off when a new private message instantly flashed from a dedicated, highly active fangirl using the username sis_star. The message read, "I'm so incredibly happy today, Vortex. I officially got first place in the entire grade on our exams, and you happen to upload a brand new video at the exact same time." Intrigued, Leo clicked into their extensive chat history and discovered she had been messaging his account ever since he first started streaming, sending hundreds of deeply personal messages sharing the intimate details of her daily life, expressing how deeply she adored his artistry, and constantly reminding him to drink warm tea and rest whenever his voice sounded even slightly hoarse. Recently, her messages had become significantly more frequent, and her intense feelings were becoming completely impossible to hide behind screen. Leo thought about it carefully for about 2 seconds before typing back a simple, standard thanks. When Leo finally walked back into the noisy classroom, a dense crowd of Scarlett's wealthy girlfriends had gathered in a tight circle around her desk, excitedly whispering and giggling about something on a phone. One of the girls suddenly squealed with sparkling eyes, exclaiming that Vortex had actually replied to her message, telling Scarlett that her luck today was seriously cosmic. The moment Leo sat down at his own desk nearby, their loud conversation abruptly halted, and the bright smile on Scarlett's face faded into a cold sneer. One of the girls turned around, rolled her eyes aggressively at Leo, and told him he should just give up his pathetic act immediately because their Scarlett already belonged to someone else, a legendary, wealthy superstar singer with over 10 million followers across the nation. Leo remained completely expressionless, pulling out a blank test paper from his bag. Scarlett then chimed in, stating coldly to her friends that real life, everyday romance wasn't even worth mentioning compared to the pure genius of Vortex. Hearing this, Leo's hand froze completely midair as the pieces fell into place, realizing with absolute certainty that the obsessive fangirl or star was none other than the arrogant Scarlett sitting right across the room. Chapter 3. The Music Festival Tickets. After the final classes of the afternoon wrapped up, the homeroom teacher stood at the podium to go over standard National Day holiday safety reminders before pulling out a thick, glossy stack of event tickets from her folder. She enthusiastically explained that a close friend of hers working on the executive staff of the upcoming Seagull Square Music Festival had managed to secure her some exclusive extras, and any student interested could come down to the front and claim one. The entire classroom immediately erupted into chaotic cheers, and the teacher quickly projected the official artist lineup onto the large screen. The digital poster featured a few third-tier pop singers, some original indie rock artists, and then, right at the top bill, a student suddenly screamed out in absolute shock that Vortex was listed as the main headliner performing an exclusive live set. Scarlett, who always maintained a cold, elite, and completely aloof exterior in class, unexpectedly raised her hand higher than anyone else, shouting that she wanted one immediately. Because of what the students called the Scarlett effect, every single person in the room immediately rushed the podium to join in, and all the available tickets vanished into thin air in less than 30 seconds. Leo was one of the very few students left sitting down who did not receive a ticket from the teacher. The moment school let out, a few of the wealthy boys blocked Leo right at the classroom entrance, aggressively waving their glossy festival passes directly in his face. They sneered arrogantly, taunting him by saying a broke scholarship loser like him could never afford a ticket that cost $180 retail. When Leo looked at them and asked what they wanted, the leader of the group laughed nastily and said he would gladly give Leo a ticket right now if Leo got down on his knees and crawled under his legs. Leo stared at the tickets in their hands and simply frowned, completely confused by their elaborate display. In reality, the corporate organizers of the festival had already personally couriered Leo a massive, thick stack of premium, all-access VIP passes, which were currently crammed inside the front pocket of his backpack. When Leo casually looked at them and asked, "Isn't it just a simple music festival ticket?" the boys burst out into hysterical laughter, loudly accusing him of acting tough to save face and claiming these high-demand passes were absolutely impossible to get. Leo calmly nodded his head, quietly murmured, "I actually do have one." And under their completely stunned, silent gazes, he reached into his bag and pulled out a thick, heavy stack of pristine VIP passes. Chapter 4. Commotion at the Gates. By the time the weekend finally arrived, the massive plaza at Seagull Square was completely packed to maximum capacity with thousands of roaring people, massive digital banners, and endless lines of fans holding glowing LED signs. The corporate festival organizers had originally insisted on sending a private luxury car to pick Leo up from his residence. But because he deeply valued his privacy and didn't want anyone exposing where he lived, he decided to take public transit and arrived early all by himself. Still wearing his oversized school jacket to blend in, he slowly squeezed his way through the dense sea of people moving toward the main VIP gate. Unfortunately, right as he finally reached the front ticket checkpoint, he ran straight into the entire group of his wealthy classmates and the homeroom teacher, who were currently organizing the students into a neat line. The moment their eyes landed on Leo, their faces twisted as if they had just seen a disgusting monster, immediately mocking him out loud for being a pathetic, desperate simp who wouldn't miss a single chance to creepily get close to Scarlett. Scarlett, who was dressed in a stunning, incredibly expensive fluffy white gauze dress, frowned deeply and shot Leo a look of pure, unadulterated disdain the moment she noticed his cheap school uniform. The homeroom teacher quickly stepped in between them, staring down at Leo disapprovingly, telling him that he couldn't possibly get past the guard without a valid ticket and that he should just save himself the embarrassment and go home. Leo calmly reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a ticket, and said, "I have one right here." The wealthy classmates instantly started stirring up the surrounding crowd, loudly accusing Leo of being a greasy, illegal ticket scalper who had clearly stolen or grabbed a bunch of passes at school just to resell them outside for quick cash. They yelled to the teacher that they had all personally seen a whole thick stack of tickets hidden inside his backpack a few days prior. Every single burning, accusatory eye in the plaza landed heavily on Leo, and Scarlett looked at him with an expression of profound disgust. The teacher stepped forward aggressively, reaching out to grab Leo's arm to force him away so he wouldn't embarrass the institution's name in public. Leo firmly shoved her hand away from his jacket and asked expressionlessly, "Or has it ever occurred to any of your narrow minds that maybe the official organizers gave me those tickets directly?" Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Following a brief, heavy silence at the gate, a massive burst of mocking, condescending laughter exploded from the wealthy students. They ridiculed Leo at the top of their lungs, shouting to the gathering crowd that even though all of their families were incredibly rich and politically powerful, none of them had received free VIP invites from the corporate directors. So why on earth would the organizers give them to a poor, ragged kid standing in a public high school uniform? The loud commotion quickly drew a massive crowd of curious festival-goers and onlookers. The homeroom teacher looked utterly humiliated to be associated with Leo, while Scarlett completely stopped looking in his direction entirely, treating his very physical existence as an offensive stain on her eyes. With so many people backing them up, the wealthy heirs became even bolder. Before Leo could even react, a rich kid named Kalen suddenly stepped forward, aggressively snatched the ticket right out of Leo's hand, and self-righteously declared to the guards that since the pass was clearly obtained through illegal scalping methods, there was absolutely no point in letting him keep it. Kalen then slowly tore the premium ticket completely apart right in front of Leo's face, tossed the pieces into the wind, leaned in close, and whispered nastily into Leo's ear, "Let's see how you're getting inside the venue without a ticket now. You freak. You seriously think a piece of trash like you is worthy of breathing the same air as Scarlett?" Kalen sneered violently and used his full body weight to shove Leo backward into the crowd. Furious, Leo tightly clenched his fist, preparing to strike him down right there. But the loud physical altercation instantly caught the attention of the security team and the high-ranking venue manager, who hurried over with a team of guards. The homeroom teacher quickly intercepted the manager, explaining smoothly that Leo was just a problematic student who had been caught trying to scalp tickets illegally. The venue manager's expression immediately darkened, and he turned to Leo, coldly telling him to leave the premises immediately, causing the wealthy students to erupt into loud cheers. Unable to tolerate the false accusations for another second, Leo reached into his backpack, pulled out an official, gold-embossed corporate internal invitation letter, and asked ice-coldly, "Which one of you thinks you're qualified to make me leave?" Chapter 6. The Tables Turn. Kalen froze completely mid-laugh, his face stiffening as the venue manager snatched the gold-embossed invitation letter out of Leo's hand to closely inspect the holographic seal. Leo stood tall, calmly stating that it was an exclusive internal invitation directly from the executive board. Desperately trying to save face in front of the massive crowd of onlookers, Kalen awkwardly stammered out another accusation, claiming Leo had clearly purchased the VIP invitation from a high-end scalper online. However, an enthusiastic fan standing nearby in the crowd loudly shouted back, pointing out that every single official internal invitation letter had the specific recipient's legal name printed directly onto the security watermark, making it completely impossible for scalpers to resell them. Kalen's face instantly turned bright red as his desperate lie was completely exposed to everyone. The venue manager's attitude underwent a complete, terrifying 180-degree turn. He bowed deeply and respectfully, offering his sincerest apologies for the gross misunderstanding, and warmly invited Leo to follow him directly to the private VIP lounge. Leo let out a short, cold laugh, leaned down to pick up the torn pieces of his ticket from the dirt, and repeated the word "scalper" directly to the manager's face, explicitly stating that their malicious, false accusations had caused him actual tangible losses. The manager instantly caught on to the extreme legal and professional gravity of the situation. Straightening his posture, the manager turned fiercely toward Kalen and the surrounding students, officially announcing that because they had maliciously slandered a VIP guest and destroyed official festival property, their entry qualifications were completely revoked effective immediately, ordering security to escort them off the property. Kalen gasped in complete disbelief, loudly arguing that he had paid thousands for his ticket, but the manager coldly responded that the cost would simply be refunded through the official channels later. Gritting his teeth in pure humiliation, Kalen turned frantically towards Scarlett, begging her to use her family's high status to talk to Leo, calling Leo her pathetic simp to get him to drop the charges. Chapter 7. Scarlett's Bargain in the Backstage. Scarlett frowned deeply, her eyes moving rapidly between the gold-embossed letter and Leo's face. For the first time in her entire life, she actually walked directly toward him. Leo spoke first, cutting her off before she could even open her mouth, telling her ice-coldly that it didn't matter who begged for Kalen, absolutely nothing was going to change his mind. Scarlett looked down at Leo, masking her panic with her usual elite contempt, stating haughtily that she wasn't here to beg for anyone, but that there was a small matter she needed his help with. She pointed out that with an official internal invitation, he had total access to the backstage areas, and demanded that he help her get a private meeting with Vortex. In exchange for this massive favor, she clenched her manicured hands tightly together as if she were making a monumental, life-altering sacrifice, stating she would reluctantly allow him to sit next to her and be her deskmate again in class. Her best friend stood behind her, staring in absolute shock, murmuring out loud about how incredibly generous Scarlett was being by sacrificing her own social status for him. Leo stood there, completely speechless at her sheer narcissism. Half a second later, he let out a strange, booming laugh, raised his hand, and scattered the torn pieces of the ticket he had picked up directly over Scarlett's head like confetti, telling her to go get her brain checked at a hospital if she was truly this mentally sick. He turned on his heel and walked straight past the security gates, leaving Scarlett standing in the dirt in stunned, silent shock that a broke loser had actually rejected her charity. Leo secretly wanted to tell her the brutal truth right then, but he was legally bound by a highly restrictive confidentiality agreement with a third-rate media company he had signed with months ago, which legally hid his true identity to prevent him from overshadowing the company's other corporate talent. Fortunately, That predatory contract was officially nearing its expiration date. Leo walked deep into the private backstage area, ordered some quiet takeout, and greeted his legendary personal celebrity stylist, Julian. The moment Julian laid eyes on him, he threw his hands up in despair, loudly complaining about Leo's incredibly sloppy school uniform and messy hair, begging him to finally show some mercy and manage his public image, since he was currently a massively popular online singer with tens of millions of fans. After half an hour of intense, expert styling, hair products, and high-end wardrobe changes, Leo looked completely transformed into a sleek, stunning superstar, no longer looking anything like a mere high school student. Right then, an assistant poked their head through the dressing room door, nervously stating that a gorgeous young girl holding a massive bouquet of flowers had somehow bypassed secondary security and was outside in the private hallway, looking specifically for Vortex. Chapter 8. The Backstage Rejection. Leo calmly walked out of the dressing room into the quiet, dimly lit VIP hallway. A few meters down, a tall girl stood with her back turned to him. She was wearing a delicate white veil over her hair and clutching a massive, vivid bouquet of expensive flowers in her arms, looking for all the world as if she had dressed up for a formal wedding. The moment she heard the heavy sound of footsteps, she spun around with a brilliant smile. It was, of course, Scarlett. The Vance family was immensely wealthy and influential in the city, making it incredibly easy for her to pull a few corporate strings to secure a private backstage pass. However, when her eyes landed squarely on Leo, who was now fully styled, wearing high-end clothes and lacking his cheap, face-hiding glasses, she completely failed to recognize him as her broke classmate Leo. To her, he was simply the flawless, godlike superstar Vortex. Overwhelmed with intense excitement, her entire body trembled as she stepped forward, her voice shaking as she said she had finally gotten to meet the man of her dreams. Leo instinctively took 2 steps back, keeping a firm distance between them. Scarlett's confident smile faded slightly at his coldness, but she quickly gathered her courage, holding the massive bouquet out toward him. Introducing herself as a top student from the prestigious number 1 high school, stating she had loved every single one of his songs for months and desperately wanted to be friends. The Scarlett standing before him now seemed like an entirely different human being from the cold, arrogant monster who had humiliated him at the desks just days ago. Leo stared directly into her eyes and asked ice-coldly, "Do you really not recognize who I am?" Scarlett blinked in complete confusion, assuming he meant she recognized him from his blurry online silhouettes. She hurriedly opened her phone, pulling up her private messaging screen to prove she was his number 1 fangirl, @S_star. Leo didn't even bother to glance at the screen, telling her coldly to take her flowers and get out of his sight. Panicking, Scarlett's voice cracked as she asked if she had somehow done something wrong to offend him. Leo shrugged his shoulders casually, looked her dead in the eye, and responded that he had personally witnessed every single disgusting thing she had done at the ticket gates that morning, stating calmly, "To be honest, I really, deeply dislike toxic people like you." The massive bouquet slipped right out of Scarlett's paralyzed hands, crashing hard onto the concrete floor as she stood there completely frozen, on the very verge of tears. Chapter 9. The Ambush. Leo pushed past her, completely ignoring her tears, and walked out to prepare for his massive live set. This was far from his first time performing for a massive crowd, and he executed his scheduled slot from 6 to 7 p.m. with absolute, flawless precision, driving the thousands of fans in the stadium into a complete frenzy. After the successful performance wrapped up, Julian had to leave immediately for another high-fashion gig in a different city, while Leo stayed behind in the quiet venue until nearly 11 p.m., patiently signing autographs for a small group of VIP fans. By the time the crowd finally dispersed, Leo stuffed his expensive stage outfit back into his backpack, threw his old-school jacket back on, and dragged his exhausted body toward the dark exit gates. "Leo, stop right there, you little piece of trash," a harsh voice echoed from the shadows. Kalen, who had been brutally kicked out of the festival earlier that morning, was standing in the dark alleyway accompanied by a large group of his wealthy lackeys. his face twisted in pure rage. Instinctively, Leo swung his heavy backpack over his shoulder, asking impatiently what they wanted now. Seeing the movement, Kalen and his boys immediately rushed forward, aggressively tackling Leo against the brick wall and violently ripping the backpack right out of his hands. The zipper broke open, spilling the contents onto the pavement. One of the lackeys gasped, pulling out the exact custom stage outfit that Vortex had just worn on stage. Kalen froze for a second before letting out a loud, mocking laugh, erroneously concluding that Leo was nothing more than a pathetic backstage errand boy doing low-wage grunt work for the stars, which perfectly explained how a poor kid had gotten a VIP invitation letter. Reassured by this completely false conclusion, Kalen arrogantly demanded that Leo hand over the rest of the celebrity gear so they could resell it for real money. When Leo flatly refused, Kalen stepped up close, challenging him to a physical fight. Suddenly, Scarlett slowly walked out from the corner of the alleyway. The expensive flowers she had been carrying were now completely wilted, their colorful petals scattered all over the dirty ground behind her. She stared at Leo with eyes full of deep, burning resentment. Without saying a single word, she walked up and violently threw the ruined bouquet directly into Leo's face. With pure disgust dripping from every syllable, she shrieked, "If it weren't for a disgusting loser like you getting in the way, Vortex would never hate me. Leo, you should just disappear from this earth." Chapter 10. The Beatdown and Rescue. Leo was so thoroughly stunned by her sheer insanity that he actually let out a loud laugh, asking her if she was seriously losing her mind. Scarlett let out a cold snort, completely refusing to look at him any longer, turned directly to Kalen, and said ice-coldly, "He's all yours. Do whatever you want with him." Overjoyed by Scarlett's explicit permission and encouragement, Kalen grinned maliciously, barking at his heavy-set lackeys to beat the absolute living hell out of him. The entire dark alleyway instantly descended into utter chaos as the group of wealthy boys surrounded Leo, launching a flurry of aggressive shoves and heavy kicks. Leo took a hard punch straight to the jaw head-on, refusing to back down. The moment the guy got close enough, Leo used his full force to slam into him, charging straight through the crowd like a madman to target Kalen directly. Someone behind him grabbed his jacket, but Leo violently shook him off, ignoring a heavy kick that landed squarely on his back. He managed to seize Kalen tightly by the collar, freezing the smug grin right off the rich kid's face. Leo raised his fist and smashed it repeatedly across Kalen's nose, drawing immediate blood. Kalen screamed out in pure panic, frantically yelling for his friends to hold Leo down and pin him to the ground. Outnumbered and exhausted, Leo was eventually overwhelmed by the sheer number of hands and was forced hard onto the concrete. Just as an enraged Kalen wiped the blood from his nose and lifted his heavy boot to stomp on Leo's face, a sleek luxury Rolls-Royce suddenly slammed its brakes by the roadside. The heavy door flew open, and Julian stepped out into the alley light with a dark, terrifyingly cold expression. Julian stood at a towering 6 feet 3 inches with a massive, broad-shouldered build of an elite athlete, and the moment he moved forward, the wealthy teenagers froze in absolute terror. Kalen stammered out, asking who he was, but a lackey frantically tugged his sleeve, whispering that it was Julian, the legendary celebrity stylist who was famously best friends with Vortex. Scarlett's face instantly turned pale white with shock. Julian cut them off with a booming, cold laugh, told them they would all face legal ruin, and pulled Leo straight into the luxury car. Inside the car, Julian furiously scolded Leo for not calling the police or security. Leo sighed, explaining that he couldn't afford to cause a massive national media scene because there were still 2 months left on his highly restrictive confidentiality agreement, and he didn't want to pay the massive corporate penalty fee. Seeing that Leo's perfect grades meant he could easily pass any exam without even showing up to class, Julian told him to forget about that toxic school entirely, offering him the keys to one of his empty luxury villas in the city. Chapter 11. Studying from Home. That very night, Julian drove Leo to the gates of the most exclusive gated villa district in the city. The next morning, Leo officially submitted a formal digital application to the school administration requesting full permission to study entirely from home while preparing for the final exams. The homeroom teacher granted it almost instantly, glad to be rid of him since his reputation in class had been completely ruined by the forum rumors anyway. His classroom desk became permanently vacant, and wild, malicious rumors began spreading like wildfire across the school's anonymous online forums. Some students claimed Leo was simply too humiliated to ever show his face again after being brutally rejected by the school beauty, while others claimed he had been caught scamming people at the festival. Inside the quiet safety of the villa, Leo completely tuned out the noise, spending his days solving advanced university practice exams. One afternoon, Julian tossed him a bottle of soda, asking if he had officially uploaded his highly anticipated new single, offering to take over managing the chaotic comment section for a bit. As Julian scrolled through the screen, he suddenly frowned in deep confusion, asking Leo who this psycho was that he had actually replied to in the past. Leo glanced over and saw that over the past few days, Scarlett had been spamming his private Vortex account with thousands of long, desperate paragraphs, writing elaborate, fake explanations trying to justify her actions at the festival. Leo silently took the phone from Julian's hand and cleanly blocked her account permanently. Leo stayed in complete isolation at the villa all the way until January, when he finally had to return to the physical school building to sit for the mandatory final examinations. This specific test was a massive, highly competitive joint examination held across 7 top national universities, and every senior was required to attend in person. Because the seating charts were strictly arranged based on prior academic grades, Scarlett and Leo were assigned the absolute first and second desks in the room. Before the proctor could distribute the papers, Scarlett suddenly turned around and whispered sharply to Leo, telling him he better not dare leave after the test, because she had something critically important to ask him. Having zero patience left for her games, Leo rejected her flatly, without looking up, telling her to say whatever she had to say right now or shut up. Scarlett frowned deeply, taking a deep breath to speak, but at that exact moment, the stern proctor walked into the room, loudly reminding the students that outstanding results on this specific joint exam would lead to immediate, direct admission into Horizon University or Zenith University. Chapter 12. Lunatic in the Cafeteria. The proctor's booming voice instantly cut Scarlett off, forcing her to turn around and focus entirely on her exam paper. The moment the intense morning Chinese language exam finally concluded, Leo headed straight to the noisy school cafeteria to grab a quiet lunch. He had just sat down with his tray when Scarlett suddenly marched over, sliding into the seat directly across from him while a large group of her wealthy girlfriends stood behind her, glaring down at him with hostile expressions. Scarlett leaned in, demanding to know if Leo personally knew the superstar Vortex. When Leo calmly continued eating and asked why she cared, Scarlett snapped, stating that he absolutely must know him. Otherwise, the famous Julian would have never rescued him from the alleyway, and there was no other logical way a poor kid could get a VIP invite. She angrily complained that Vortex had completely blocked her account and commanded Leo to act as her middleman to explain things to him. Leo stopped eating, looked up with an expressionless face, and asked if he should explain to Vortex that her clique's vicious cyberbullying and physical assaults somehow weren't real. Wronged and incredibly angry that a scholarship student was talking back to her, Scarlett raised her voice, screaming, "Leo, stop being so aggressively mean to me. You used to be completely obsessed with me and liked me, didn't you? Then you should easily understand how incredibly painful it feels to love someone who completely ignores your existence." Leo stared at her with the exact expression of someone looking at a complete lunatic, genuinely asking her if she was mentally stable, demanding to know who on earth had ever told her that he liked her. He stood up, picked up his tray, and added ice-coldly, "Asterisk, and let me tell you a little secret. However much I completely despise you, Vortex hates you just as much." The moment Leo walked back into his temporary dorm room to pack the rest of his things, he found Julian lounging casually across his bed. Leo looked at him in total surprise, asking what he was doing on campus. Julian flashed a massive, mischievous grin, revealing that the school board had just paid him a massive corporate fee to act as the head director for the upcoming final graduation performance showcase tonight. Julian laughed shamelessly, admitting that the school had actually explicitly invited the superstar Vortex to perform as the grand finale. And since Leo's restrictive media contract had officially expired at midnight, Julian was now legally his official manager and had gladly accepted the massive paycheck on his behalf. Chapter 13, The Unmasking. The moment the grueling afternoon exams finally concluded, Julian's professional glam team went to work in a private room, completely transforming Leo's appearance for the grand graduation showcase, since he no longer had any legal need to hide his true identity from the public. The school's state-of-the-art auditorium was packed to the brim with over 5,000 students, parents, and faculty members, and the mysterious superstar Vortex was the absolute biggest attraction of the evening. Suddenly, the house lights went pitch black, and the massive red velvet curtains slowly rose. Leo sat entirely alone in the absolute center of the grand stage, bathed in a single, brilliant spotlight, holding a sleek acoustic guitar. The moment he leaned into the microphone, his rich, unmistakable voice cut through the auditorium. After performing 3 of his massive hit songs to a roaring crowd, Leo returned to the private backstage lounge to rest and drink some water. Suddenly, the lounge door flew open, and Kalen walked in accompanied by his wealthy lackeys, all of them wearing incredibly fake, ingratiating smiles as they approached the superstar. Kalen bowed slightly, saying they were massive fans and politely asking if Vortex could give an autograph. Leo slowly set his water bottle down on the table, looked Kalen dead in the eye, and said bluntly, "No, because I absolutely do not like the look of your face. If there's nothing else, get the hell out of my room." Kalen's fragile pride was instantly crushed in front of his friends. His true colors immediately surfaced, and he cursed angrily, shouting that Vortex was just a trashy internet beggar who thought he was a real celebrity, claiming the only reason he even asked for an autograph was to please Scarlett. Suddenly, the lounge door was violently slammed open from the outside. Scarlett stormed into the room, her face red with rage, and before Kalen could even finish his sentence, she raised her hand and viciously slapped Kalen hard across the face, shrieking furiously at him for daring to insult her beloved Vortex. She turned to Kalen, coldly commanding him to get on his knees and apologize to the superstar. Gritting his teeth in pure hatred, Kalen was forced to mutter a miserable apology under Scarlett's intense glare. Leo casually scrolled through his smartphone, completely ignoring the theatrical drama. Scarlett then turned toward Leo, her voice trembling with desperation as she asked if that was finally enough to please him, or if she should force Kalen to apologize again. Leo slowly shook his head, stating calmly that even if Kalen apologized 10,000 times, he would never receive forgiveness, and then he pointed his finger directly at Scarlett, adding, "And that includes you." A deeply wronged, crying expression appeared on Scarlett's face as she wept, screaming that she truly didn't understand what she had ever done wrong. Just then, the door opened, and Julian leaned lazily against the frame, smiling warmly as he said, "George, the car is ready. Let's go." Chapter 14, The Bitter Truth. Julian's casual use of Leo's real name hit the quiet room like a massive thunderbolt. The frantic expression on Scarlett's face instantly shifted from deep confusion to intense scrutiny, and finally to absolute, horrified disbelief. Kalen and his lackeys looked as though they had just seen a ghost rise from the grave, staring fixedly at Leo's flawless face as Kalen pointed a trembling finger, stuttering out, He's Leo, that broke scholarship loser from the 3rd row." Julian walked into the room, chuckling softly as he casually confirmed that the legendary superstar Vortex was indeed the exact same Leo they had bullied all semester. Leo calmly packed his personal items into his bag, slowly slipping his official school student ID card right into the front pocket, completely confirming his identity beyond a shadow of a doubt. The moment Leo turned to walk out the door, Scarlett completely lost her elite composure, frantically rushing forward to grab tightly onto his sleeve, her lips trembling violently as she tried to form words to explain away her months of cruelty. Leo didn't even blink, violently yanking his sleeve completely free from her grasp. Scarlett ran after him out into the bright public hallway, her face turning a deep crimson color as she wept openly in front of the passing students, begging for his forgiveness and screaming that she truly didn't know he was Vortex, desperately boasting about how many millions of his digital albums she had purchased with her parents' money. Leo stopped dead in his tracks, turned around slowly, and looked straight into her panicked eyes, interrupting her tirade with a voice as cold as ice. "You are a deeply toxic person who is completely full of malice toward anyone you deem beneath you, and you take immense joy in encouraging your wealthy friends to bully others for your own amusement. So let's be entirely honest here. It's not that you suddenly realize that bullying is a disgusting, wrong thing to do. You just realize that you accidentally bullied the wrong person." Scarlett panicked, frantically trying to shift all the blame onto Kaylin and her girlfriends. But Leo simply turned his back on her and walked away, completely done wasting his breath on her. Chapter 15. The Grading Scandal. The very next morning, the explosive news of the massive high school performance and the unmasking leaked out to national tabloid reporters, who swarmed the school gates to interview the students. Because the administration had zero time to prepare a corporate cover story, the aggressive reporters ended up securing the absolute freshest, most honest first-hand information possible from the students. Very quickly, the horrifying story of Leo being severely bullied on campus shot straight to the #1 trending spot on the national charts, with Kaylin's name appearing at the center of the controversy. Curious netizens across the country started digging deeper into the wealthy students' histories, completely exposing every single text message, video, and act of bullying Kaylin and his clique had ever committed. Furthermore, Leo's tragic personal background was fully uncovered, revealing to the public that he was an orphan who had lost both parents at a young age, working grueling night shifts to support himself while maintaining top grades. Public outrage exploded across social media, fiercely condemning the school administration and the homeroom teacher for actively encouraging a culture of intense school bullying. In the midst of this national media firestorm, Leo was formally called back to the principal's office by the frantic homeroom teacher. The moment he walked in, he found Scarlett, Kaylin, and his entire group of lackeys sitting there with pale, terrified faces. Leo sat down across from the teacher, completely expressionless. The homeroom teacher, whose face looked incredibly stressed, slammed a heavy document onto the desk, shouting angrily, "Leo, what exactly do you think you are doing to this school's reputation?" Leo let out a small, amused sigh, asking calmly which specific matter she was referring to. The teacher pointed furiously at the paper, which was the official citywide ranking sheet from the recent joint university entrance examination. At the very top of the first page, printed in bold ink, the text read, "Leo, 734 points, first place in the entire city." Scarlett and the others stared at the paper in utter, paralyzing disbelief as Scarlett whispered out loud, "Weren't you always ranked second behind me?" Leo completely ignored her, looking directly at the teacher as she sharply reminded him that when he was admitted on a scholarship, the legal agreement clearly stated he was never allowed to rank first in the grade ahead of the wealthy donor's children. Chapter 16. The Apology Video. Leo leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered by her anger, and reminded the teacher calmly that before signing that highly corrupt, illegal agreement, the school board had given him a measly $50,000 allowance. According to the standard clause, breaking the agreement meant paying triple the amount back in damages, totaling exactly $150,000. Leo smiled slightly, though his eyes remained completely dark, asking her if she truly believed that a multi-millionaire superstar like Vortex couldn't easily afford that tiny penalty fee. He casually pointed out that if he were to leak the details of that corrupt contract to the national press, proving the school deliberately suppressed an orphan's academic scores for 3 years just to flatter wealthy real estate heirs, the school would face immediate federal closure. The homeroom teacher's face turned completely black with terror as she realized he held all the cards. Slamming her hand on the desk, she demanded that he at least upload a public statement clarifying the online rumors to protect the school's brand. Leo nodded thoughtfully, stating he would agree to a solution. He would force Kaylin and his lackeys to record a formal, public apology video admitting to their crimes, which he would then upload to his massive platform to ease the public's fury. Kaylin immediately screamed out that there was absolutely no way he would humiliate his family name like that. But under intense, desperate pressure from the terrified homeroom teacher, Kaylin and his friends were forced to sit in front of a camera and record a full apology. Only after personally watching Leo hit the upload button did the teacher finally allow him to leave the room. The moment Leo stepped out of the office building into the courtyard, frantic, running footsteps sounded directly behind him as Scarlett clutched the hem of her expensive skirt, tearfully begging him to stop. Chapter 17. Karma Backfires. Scarlett looked at Leo with a pitiful, weeping expression, begging him to please stop hating her, offering to give him all her money and do absolutely anything he commanded if he would just take her back into his life. Leo looked down at her and answered without a single shred of hesitation. Go through every single ounce of physical and mental torment you put me through for 3 years. Only when you have suffered exactly as I have will I believe a single word out of your mouth. Scarlett looked as if she had just been thrown into a frozen ice cave as Leo turned his back and left the school gates permanently, completely resolute in his decision never to grant her forgiveness. Leo officially withdrew his enrollment from Silverwood Academy and proudly accepted a full ride to Zenith University in Beijing. A week later, he and Julian boarded a luxury flight headed toward the capital. The moment they touched down, Julian pulled out his phone, laughing hysterically as he showed Leo that the public apology video had completely backfired on Kaylin online. Millions of netizens flooded the comment section, pointing out how incredibly fake, smug, and completely unwilling Kaylin and his rich friends looked on camera, stating human trash like them deserved total social ruin. Suddenly, Leo's phone vibrated rapidly with notifications from the old high school class group chat. He clicked in and saw that the students had turned the entire high-profile drama into viral memes, specifically editing Scarlett's face onto the body of a dog crawling at Leo's feet, spamming the chat nonstop. In a desperate bid for his attention, Scarlett had actually replied to the cruel memes in the group chat, writing directly to Leo. Leo, everyone used to humiliate you by calling you my simp. Now I'm willingly posting this meme of myself as your dog. Can you please finally forgive me now? Disgusted by her utter lack of dignity and profound mental instability, Leo cleanly deleted the group chat entirely to give his eyes some peace. Chapter 18. Ultimate Fate. Over the next 4 years of his successful university career, Scarlett constantly attempted to force her way back into Leo's life, creating hundreds of fake online accounts to message him, following every single one of his social media profiles, and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars sending massive, flashy gifts during his live streams. Leo blocked every single account without a single word. Meanwhile, Kaylin and his group of wealthy lackeys were completely unable to withstand the relentless, crushing weight of the national online backlash and were officially expelled from the academy. They were forced to transfer to a dangerous vocational school on the outskirts of the city, where they quickly made the mistake of trying their arrogant bullying tactics on ruthless gang members who didn't care about their parents' money. The gang members brutally retaliated, physically beating them and completely ruining their families' businesses, forcing Kaylin and his friends to finally experience the true, agonizing horror of life-destroying bullying. From the age of 18 until he turned 22, Leo occasionally spotted Scarlett standing in the front row at his various massive, sold-out arena concerts. She always spent millions to secure the absolute best VIP seats, her striking looks making her stand out instantly from the crowd. Yet, every single time his eyes scanned the front row, his gaze moved past her face in a fraction of a second, never pausing for even a millisecond to acknowledge her existence. Every single time Scarlett attended, She carried a massive bouquet of fresh flowers, but the stems were completely stripped of leaves and left covered in long, sharp, bloody thorns. She would tightly clutch the bare thorns with her naked hands, letting the sharp points pierce her skin until her hands bled openly onto the arena floor, forcing herself to endure the physical torment as a twisted, desperate attempt at redemption for the pain she had caused him. By the time Leo turned 22 years old, he had officially fallen deeply in love with a gentle, quiet, and profoundly graceful university classmate whose eyes were filled with nothing but pure tenderness whenever she looked at him. On the beautiful summer day, they officially announced their relationship to the public. Leo performed a massive, celebratory outdoor concert at a public plaza. After the historic, roaring excitement of the massive crowd finally faded away into the quiet night, only scattered trash and empty cups remained across the dark concrete ground. And there, left entirely alone in the very dead center of the empty VIP front row, lay a single, withered, thorn-covered bouquet of flowers, completely soaked in dried blood, abandoned in the dark. Chapter 19. The Melody of Tomorrow. 3 years after the final concert at the plaza, Leo's life had completely transitioned into a serene, beautiful rhythm far away from the shadows of his past. The media storms had long since faded, replaced by the steady, enduring success of his music career and his work as a respected producer. But his greatest joy didn't come from the platinum records lining his studio walls. It came from the quiet, sunlit apartment he shared with Clara, the gentle girl who had walked into his life during his university years and never left. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the golden sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their home, illuminating a grand piano where Leo sat, casually humming a new melody. Clara stepped into the room holding 2 steaming mugs of tea, a soft, warm smile gracing her lips as she listened to him play. She didn't see him as the legendary superstar Vortex, nor did she see him as the broken scholarship kid from Silverwood Academy. To her, he was simply Leo, the resilient, kind-hearted man she loved. "Is that the final track for the new album?" Clara asked softly, placing a mug beside him and leaning against the piano. Leo stopped playing, looking up at her with eyes full of absolute peace. He reached out, gently wrapping his fingers around hers. "Yeah, it's the closing song. I want it to sound like a new beginning." That evening, Leo hosted an intimate, private gathering to celebrate the album's completion. Only a handful of his closest friends were invited, including Julian, who had officially retired from styling to become a full-time music executive. Julian looked exceptionally proud, raising a glass to Leo and Clara, loudly declaring them the absolute best team in the industry. There were no flashing paparazzi lights, no toxic classmates, and no painful memories lingering in the corners of the room. The past had completely lost its power over him. Later that night, long after the guests had departed, Leo received a brief notification on his personal phone from his legal team. The message confirmed that the last of the restraining orders against Scarlett had been finalized, and her family, now completely reclusive after losing their social standing, had permanently relocated overseas. She had finally stopped sending the thorn-covered flowers. She had finally vanished from his world completely. Leo looked down at the screen for a second, feeling absolutely nothing but a profound sense of closure. He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked out onto the balcony, where Clara was standing, wrapped in a cozy cardigan, looking up at the clear night sky. He stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Clara leaned back into his chest, letting out a contented sigh. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured, placing her hands over his. Leo looked out over the glittering lights of the peaceful city, feeling the steady, calming beat of her heart against his. The scars of his youth were entirely healed, replaced by the beautiful reality he had built with his own hands. "Nothing at all," Leo whispered softly, kissing the side of her head. "Just that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Chapter 20. The Symphony of Us. 2 years after settling into their quiet sanctuary, Leo stood backstage at the National Symphony Hall, adjusting the cuffs of a sharp, tailored black suit. This evening was entirely different from the roaring pop concerts of his youth. He had been invited to guest conduct a full orchestral arrangement of his original compositions. There were no flashy lights or digital screens, just the timeless resonance of woodwinds, brass, and strings. Julian leaned against the dressing room door frame, arms crossed, looking on with a rare, quiet satisfaction. "Never thought I'd see the internet's favorite rock star wielding a conductor's baton," Julian teased, though his eyes held immense pride. "You've completely outgrown the shadow of the past, Leo. I had a lot of good people helping me step out of it," Leo replied with a genuine smile, giving Julian a brief, appreciative nod before stepping out toward the stage wings. As he waited for the cue, Leo glanced through the curtain at the front row of the VIP section. Sitting right in the center was Clara, wearing a simple, elegant emerald dress. Her eyes caught his from across the distance, and she gave him a small, reassuring nod that instantly grounded his remaining nerves. Next to her sat an empty seat, reserved symbolically for the memories of his parents, adorned only with a clean, single white rose. The toxic echoes of Silverwood Academy, Kalen's malice, and Scarlett's twisted obsession were completely gone, utterly erased by the beautiful reality he had built. The stage manager gave the signal, and Leo walked out into the warm brilliance of the stage lights. The applause from the sophisticated audience swelled, filling the massive hall. Leo bowed politely, then turned his back to the crowd, stepping up onto the conductor's podium. He looked across the sea of musicians, raised the baton, and brought it down. The music swelled, a grand, triumphant symphony that started with low, melancholic cellos representing his early struggles, before building into a soaring, joyful crescendo of violins that celebrated his hard-won peace. Every note was pure, clear, and unburdened. As the final chord echoed perfectly through the hall and dissolved into a standing ovation, Leo turned to the audience, his eyes locking onto Clara, who was smiling through tears of pure joy. He knew, with absolute certainty, that his true story had only just begun.